Conversation is the key to connection. But what is happening when technology is either getting in the way or helping that conversation? I've asked my friend Meico, the Mindful Techie, to join me today to talk about what technology is doing to conversations and connections. Meico, take it away.
Well, I would first start by saying that technology is a tool, and tools
Okay.
are neither good nor bad. So I like to think of technology in the aggregate as a hammer, right? You can use a
Okay.
hammer to build or to construct something. You can also use a hammer to destroy something. And so
Good point.
it's it's
Yeah.
it's a lot of it has to do with how we're using the technology and are we using it in appropriate ways in the right context, depending on what our intention or what our goals are.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, because we think about it, like obviously having a telephone is very helpful if you need to contact someone in a hurry. But we also know that as soon as you take away face to face conversation by using tools like telephone or video technology, that something is lost. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so technology is not a substitute for in-person conversation or connection. So just like what we're doing right now,
Right.
we can certainly facilitate this virtually, but there is no substitute for that, right?
Right. And now, what is it that's lost? I mean, I've done a little bit of reading myself, but I want to hear from your perspective. What happens as soon as you strip away the face to face, in person interaction?
Well, a lot of what's missing is are the cues, right? So there are what's lost lots of time is nonverbal cues
Right.
that are lost. And the other thing I want to note is that we're talking about this and we're making an assumption about how able-bodied someone is, right? And so,
Oh, that's an excellent point.
yeah, so if someone is hard of
Right.
hearing or has some other disability.
And I'm so glad you
That-
brought that
yeah.
up because I forget that all the time.
Yeah.
So absolutely, we need to accommodate for people who have differing abilities or maybe something that's getting in the way of that communication and connection. So tell us a little more about that.
So in that regard, I like to think of it in terms of the assets or some of the things that technology adds, right? So we
Okay.
gave the example of someone who's differently able, perhaps someone who's hard of hearing, perhaps someone who speaks a different language, for example. We have lots of
Right.
translation tools
Right.
that are available. We have closed captioning tools.
Okay.
Maybe someone has a challenge with mobility, and so they're not able to leave their home. So maybe a virtual meeting might be the most appropriate for someone in that particular case. So maybe it makes more sense for that person to work from home depending on the type of work that they do. So
What I'm seeing there is a continuum. So
Yeah.
the best is face to face in person where possible. Where not possible, you can use tools to still get
Yes.
something close to.
yes.
What happens when it goes the other way and it gets in the way?
Well, you end up with sometimes confusion, right? You end up with inefficiencies
Sure.
in terms of productivity or time lost because there are misunderstandings or miscues, right? So
Right.
you understood one thing, you're going off and working on it, and then your final product comes back and it's not exactly what we talked about, right? And part of
Right.
that has to do with going back to something I mentioned earlier, which is how you're using the tool really depends on what your intention is, right? What your goal
Okay.
is or what your vision for success is. And so
Sure.
if we don't have a clear understanding of that and we're not in agreement with that,
Right.
then that can lead to some of these miscues that we're talking about.
So, I mean, I know that can happen even in a face to face conversation. And I say this to my kids all the time communication is hard. So, what we're saying is that technology tools can be a good idea to help make that connection, especially when you have a situation where maybe someone is not able to hear or some other situation that gets in the way. But you need to be mindful and intentional in how you use those tools to affect that better communication. So I think that what we're getting down to is that communication is hard, and there will still, even with the use of tools, there can still be miscues and miscommunication.
Yes. And you also want to think about, too, which tools are appropriate in which context, right? So
Sure.
I like to set what I call my rules of engagement. So when I'm working with clients, I indicate to them, for example, with email, I view email as a non-urgent form of communication. So if you send me an email,
Ah.
I assume that I have 24 to 48 hours to get back to you, but that works only if I communicate that's
Right,
my
because-
expectation.
Because other
right?
people assume email is an immediate form of
Exactly.
communication. Right. No, I understand. That sort of plays along with in terms of being able to understand what people's preferred communication method or style is.
Yes.
And you're right. I absolutely make an effort to understand when I'm communicating with someone what is their preferred method and to learn how they work
Yes.
with email and other tools. So that's great insight, Meico. Really appreciate that. So we need to remember communication is part of connection. We can use tools to facilitate that and make it better, but we need to remember and never lose sight of the fact that it can be difficult. Things can get in the way, and that sometimes can lead to some pretty big misunderstandings.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you
really
for having me.
appreciate that. If there's anything Meico can help you with to do with mindfulness related to technology, please feel free to message us below. And if I can help you in terms of practicing conversations and making those communications more effective, specifically in the sales context, you can message me below. Thanks for watching.